So, topic of today is developing leaders within your organization. First of all, you got to recognize that this is what your job is as a leader, is to make more leaders. You got to take ownership of that. So I'm going to start off with that, taking ownership of the fact that the people that work for you, you are responsible, you own them becoming leaders. So I'm going to start with that. And then I'm going to go into, well, I'm basically going to the laws of combat, but I'm going to flip them upside down. So when you're in charge and you want to make other leaders, you want to develop leaders inside your team, within your organization, then I'm going to start off by talking about decentralized command, which means you're going to put other people in charge. That's what we're going to do. We're going to utilize decentralized command to develop leaders by putting other people in charge. Good leaders make other people lead. That's what you're going to do. You make leaders by making other people lead. Start small and then grow their responsibility. You also have to manage the risk. So from a combat perspective, I don't say, hey, Leif, welcome to Tasking a Bruiser. Here's a combat operation I want you to be in charge of that you've never done before. You've never been in a leadership position. Go ahead and execute. No, that's not what I do. Instead, we start off with, hey, Leif, you're going to start off by coming up with a plan, and then we'll review the plan and see how that looks. And then after a while, oh, Leif, you're a squad leader right now. Cool. We're going to have you take down this little building that's outside the main target set. And we grow his responsibility as he executes. From a business perspective, what does that look like? Oh, Steve, welcome to Echelon Front. Do we say, hey, Steve, welcome to Echelon Front. We got a 4-day workshop with a huge client. You go ahead and do a solo operation there? No, that's not what we do. We send him on an operation with Leif and Jamie, and Steve only briefs one of the laws of combat. That's all he does. And he can handle that, and then he learns from there. So we're going to start small. We're going to grow the responsibility. It's important to note, and I've been talking a lot about this lately, there is risk with decentralized command. There absolutely is risk with decentralized command. You are going to have to mitigate it to the best of your ability, make sure that it doesn't get out of control, but there absolutely is risk with decentralized command. When we got to Ramadi, the first combat operation that Leif did, he did it by himself. He was ready for it, of course, but hey, maybe I didn't know Leif as well as I thought I did, and he got out there and lost his mind and went crazy and totally blew it, right? Could that have happened? Yeah. We had mitigated that. He'd gone through training. We'd worked together. We had a great relationship, so it wasn't a big risk. But I have seen people that seem squared away lock up. So there is risk with decentralized command when you put other people in charge. When you put somebody in charge of a project, there's a risk that they don't quite execute it the way you would, and maybe they don't execute it correctly. So you have to make sure you're mitigating that risk. Also, when you're using decentralized command to train leaders, you're going to be a little bit more of a micromanager. And you guys have heard Leif talk about that before. I was definitely more of a micromanager when we started working together and tasking a bruiser, and then over time, less and less until it was cleared hot. So number one, when you want to create leaders, use decentralized command. Number two, prioritize and execute. You have to make it a priority to train other leaders. You have to make it a priority. And that means you're going to have to say, okay, I know that I could do this training event. I know that I could do this project. I know I've done this type of project before, and it would be easier for me to do it. But the priority is to let Steve have a chance. The priority is to get Steve trained up. The priority is to build Steve's capability and confidence. So I'm going to let him run this small project. Okay, cool. I have to make that a priority. Are there times when the situation or the mission has priority over training leaders? Yeah, of course. There are absolutely times like that. If there's a big client or a huge project or a complex, risky, real-world mission that needs to be led, that might not be the time where training leaders takes priority over the project or the mission. So you have to prioritize and execute. You got to figure out, okay, I can prioritize training Steve right now because this is a relatively easy thing. He's already done 3 of these with me in the past. He's done left seat, right seat. He knows how to get it done. Cool. I can take a little risk and let him run that. I can prioritize getting him in that leadership position. There are also times where I have to prioritize the mission itself. And I'm going to say, hey, you know what, Steve, you're gonna have to watch me on this one. You can co-pilot with me, but I got to take lead until you get a little bit more repetitions underneath your belt. No factor. So that's what we're doing. Now, listen, if I have a huge project and I don't feel like Steve's ready for it yet, does that mean I just cast him out? No, I'm probably going to give him a smaller part of the mission or a smaller part of the project to run, give him a little bit of plan. I'm going to do that. I'm going to continually prioritize. I'm going to continually prioritize getting other people trained up as leaders. It's going to be good for them. It's going to develop them. And that's what I am going to do. Next up, we got simple. It's interesting how many people fail this one. You have to make sure that your subordinates understand that you're elevating them into a leadership role. You've got to make sure that they understand that your goal is that they're going to be in charge, that that's what you're trying to make happen. You also have to make sure that they know that you're not going to abandon them. I don't say, hey, Steve, here's a new client. Good luck. See you later. No, I say, hey, Steve, here's a new client. Let me know if you have any questions. Why don't you give me a brief on what your plan is going to be? I'm going to walk through those things pretty straightforward. But it's important that this person that I'm going to put into a leadership position understands what the mission is, understands who, what, where, when, how, and why they're doing what they're doing. So you've got to make sure that's understood. Once you task someone, once you decide, okay, Steve, I'm going to put you in charge of this project. Here's the mission. Here's who, what, when, where, how, and why. Then I don't just abandon him. Now I'm going to check in with him. And I'm going to check in with him to make sure he doesn't start going off course. When we used to do mission planning, I found with the SEALs, if I said, hey, Steve, here's the mission we got, go ahead and come up with a plan, I wouldn't then leave for 6 hours. I'd leave for 30 minutes. And I come back and say, hey, Steve, what do you got? What's your basic plan here? And Steve would say, yeah, it looks like we're just going to use Humvees. We're going to insert on the target. We're going to offset by about 1 kilometer, and then we're going to foot patrol in. Hey, sounds good. Yep, keep going. So I'm going to make sure his plan is kind of on target. If I come back half an hour later and I say, hey, Steve, what's your plan? He says, well, what we're planning to do is do a space shuttle insert. We're going to parachute in from the ionosphere. Like, no, okay, Steve, no, let's get that dialed in. Let's go a little bit closer to target. Let's use vehicles that we actually own. So I've seen this where it really does bite people, though. They let the person plan and continue to go off course really far, ends up causing problems. So when you do task someone with taking a leadership position, make sure that you check in with them and confirm that they're on course and that they're moving in the right direction. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to micromanage them, but asking earnest questions and making sure you understand why they're choosing a course of action and why they're doing a certain way is going to be very beneficial. But yes, you're going to put someone in charge. You're going to prioritize them and their leadership development. You're going to make sure they understand in simple, clear, concise language what is happening, what the mission is, what the goal is, why you're putting them in charge. And finally, and this is most important here, is cover and move. They are going to mess things up. As I already mentioned, there is risk in decentralized command. There is risk in letting people lead, and they are going to make mistakes. And that's okay. We just talked about this at the battlefield up at Little Bighorn. And we talked about the fact that, I had to trust that Leif was ready to go and execute a mission. I had to trust that Leif was ready to do that. But also for decentralized command to work, Leif had to trust me. He had to trust that if something didn't go right, I wasn't going to hang him out to dry. I wasn't going to berate him in front of the troops. I wasn't going to make him look stupid. No, I was going to support him. I was going to cover for him, help him get back on course. That's what cover and move means in this case. I have to cover so that people can maneuver and make little mistakes, and they can move towards becoming a better leader. So that's the 4 laws of combat. they definitely apply to developing leaders. And like I started off with, the most important thing that you have to understand and you have to take ownership is that your job as a leader is to make new leaders. And it takes investment up front. It definitely takes investment up front. Actually, Steve, when Steve and his crew were writing evaluations, and I had to pull all of his guys, all the guys that were writing these complex evaluations for all of our SEALs that worked at TradeEt, I had to invest some time up front to give them a little education on how to write these things. And yet it was very impactful and it made my job a lot easier in the end. So investing in your people up front will make your job a lot easier in the end, and you will do what you're supposed to do, which is create more leaders. And with that, Leif, I know you had some good points on this too, of your top elements of creating leaders inside your organization.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you give that example of writing those evaluations and teaching people how to do that. You put a bunch of time and effort into it. I didn't do that. I did the opposite of that. I was like, well, I'll just fix this stuff. And so then you have to continually fix it. And you're putting in a massive amount of effort and time. Either way, you're putting in a massive amount of effort and time, except with one outcome, if you're dedicated to actually training your people up and developing their capability as leaders, that's going to get better for you over time as you get to allow them to step up and lead. It never changes if you just do the work and fix it yourself and don't train them. Yeah, as we were writing down this, and Jock and I were prepping for this, I wrote down just a couple of thoughts. The 5 tips for developing leaders in my mind, the things that popped in my mind first. One, training program. Obviously, that's what Jock was talking about, is taking the time to actually train your people. 2, put them in charge of stuff. Like, find little things to put them in charge of. And there's something that Jocko learned from his mentor Delta Charlie, and he brought in a tasking to Bruiser. We put our lowest common denominator, the most junior ranking guy was Ryan Job in Charlie Platoon. We put him in charge of running an entire assault, planning and leading that assault when we were going through training, that kind of seemed crazy to me at the time. But it was an awesome thing. And Ryan thought it seemed crazy too. But we helped him out and we kind of coached him through it and stepped in and provided some guidance where we needed to. And he did awesome. He did a great job. He went back to his role as a machine gunner, understanding the challenges of leadership, what kind of information we needed, how he could better support his leadership. That's an awesome thing. Just finding things to put people in charge of. Don't be the easy button. I mean, this is a common thing for so many of us to fall into, which is, people are coming to you and it feels so good to your ego. When my team comes to me and Steve's like, hey, Leif, I don't know how to do this. You got more experience here, at Echelon front than me. What should I do here? For me to be like, here's what you should do. Because it feels good to my ego, instead of being like, hey, Steve, what do you think we should do? You got 28 years in the SEAL teams. You've been running this leadership development alignment program for 2 years now. You got a ton of experience. What do you actually think we should do? Let people make their those decisions. And obviously, if they're off, you can ask questions and make some adjustments. But you want to give people ownership. Don't be the easy button. The fourth thing I wrote down was don't try to push too hard. And we just used this up at Battlefield at Little Bighorn with some of you that were with us up there. We were talking about the example of when you're trying to get people to that are fairly junior organization and they don't even know what they don't know at this point. It's real easy to be like, you need to get in here, you need to do this training. You're pushing them really hard. And the reality is you may need them to get humbled a little bit. And Jocko did that to us when we were going through training and tasking to Bruiser, me and the other platoon commander, Seth Stone, who was in charge of Delta Platoon. He asked us how we were doing with our immediate action drills. It's a react to contact drill. And we said, we're good to go. And he didn't mean like, hey, you guys have only been through one platoon. You're not near as good as you think you are. Get over here. Let me show you what's up. What would that have done if he'd have done that? It would have closed our minds. We wouldn't have been listening. We're like, Jocko's been around the SEAL. He thinks he knows it all, and so it would have made us defensive. Instead, what he did was like, oh, you guys are good to go with IS? Okay, cool. And he let us go out in the training battlefield. We made some mistakes. We came back. We're like, man, we weren't near as good as we thought we were. We walked straight into where Jocko had set up his makeshift office in the classroom. It was like, hey, Jocko, let's talk about those IATs. And then we spent some time on the whiteboard actually talking about it with a total open mind, ready to receive because we've been humbled. So that's you definitely have to find the dichotomy of you want people to train hard, you want to push them into training and to develop them, but you don't want to push so hard when they don't even know what they don't know. You want to make sure that they have an open mind and they're willing to listen. And sometimes that takes putting them in charge of something that's maybe a little beyond their capability, that's humbling to them, or putting them in a training scenario that's humbling as well. This is the best case. Obviously not something that's going to tank the team. And then finally, the fifth thing I wrote down is that promotion isn't for everybody. And this is something that it frustrates a lot of leaders. Why does this person not want to grow? Why does this person not want to step up? Why do they want to, not get the opportunities that I'm putting ahead of them? And in the SEAL teams, we kind of had this kind of running joke was like, everyone's got to make Master Chief, which is the most senior enlisted rank. Everyone's got to make captain, which is a very senior officer rank. And the reality is that's not true. Like some people are really good. I mean, BTF Tony, my platoon chief, probably one of the absolute best platoon chiefs in the history of the SEAL teams. He never wanted to do anything but just be a platoon chief. That's all he wanted to do. So if the SEAL teams had been smart, we'd have just let him be a platoon chief over and over and over and over again. And instead, he got promoted up the chain of command where he didn't do as well with the administrative stuff that was tasked to him. So there are some people that are just really good at doing their jobs. That's all they want to do. They don't necessarily want to get promoted. It's great to try to challenge people and help them grow as leaders. But the idea that everyone has to get promoted up the chain is just simply not good. It's not good for those people that don't care about getting promoted or are interested more in what they're doing now and keep them doing what they're like doing. It's not good for the organization when you put people in positions where they really don't want to be. They're not appreciative of the opportunity there. And so I see leaders that get frustrated sometimes with people that are not excited about the opportunities for promotion or greater responsibility. And the reality is that's just the way it is for some people. And that's okay. That's all I got, Jocko.
Yeah, good stuff for sure. And interesting, when we were just discussing this before we brought everyone in, and we were talking about those immediate action drills. And I was so lucky that I got to teach them, because when you teach them, you get really good at them. And I taught them as an E5, as a 23-year-old or 24-year-old at SEAL Team 1. And you just get such a much better understanding when you watch people do them and see the mistakes. So as you're training your leaders, it's also an opportunity. You're going to see more things. You're going to detach. You're going to be able to watch from the outside. That's another reason why, one of the tricks that I used was, when it came to mission planning, have Leif come up with a plan, because then I wasn't all wrapped up in the plan and I could see it from a distance. So training your leaders is not just going to help your leaders going to get better. It's going to get you better as well.